Hey y'all, what's going on? It's Mr. Salmingo. We're looking at music part 1, and this slide says part 2. It's something we've gone over before, but I thought if you need a refresher, you could watch this video. So remember, this section is about the folk song. What you need to about the folk song is that, one, it's like oral tradition. It's been passed down, people sang it from generation to generation by word of mouth. So it's one of those that after time it sort of gets distorted and changed. It's like playing a game of telephone. When you see the word transcription right here, we're talking about trying to capture these and write them down. So we had educated urban gentlemen leading this change, and they introduced folk song to the world of this art music. The most famous person you need to know about transcribing folk songs is Herder. So if you can remember this, Herder. So Herder, he linked these songs to nationalism and said like, oh, folk song is nationalism. So everyone's like, all right, I want to listen to more folk songs, or I want to like adopt folk songs, or I want to promote folk songs because hey, I mean it's nationalistic. So these folk songs sort of became a part of the national heritage. This change when they said like, hey, it's more nationalistic, they wanted to preserve it a little bit more. So they embraced these works and they said like, oh, we should preserve these because it's our history. Problem with transcription, we've talked about this before, is that first of all, if you don't have audio recording, it's easy to forget what was being sung. They don't sing it very often, so like if they only sing it once a year, it's very limited. There's multiple parts that are going on at the same time, so thinking about having to write that down. We got long lyrics. This one that says choices, choices, choices. We talked about how some people wrote down something and some people wrote another, and they're like, who is correct? Was it me? Was it you? Was it a mistake from the singer? And then also they sort of catered it to the public. So when they transcribed these songs, they didn't necessarily transcribe it word for word. They sort of like arranged it in a little bit so that that's more poppy for everyone to watch. The first song, we've seen this so many times, is "The Day Was Breaking." It's melismatic. Remember, melismatic is stretching a syllable over a long musical phrase. Think of it as someone explains to me sort of like if you've seen Finding Nemo, how Dory sings whale or speaks whale. It's sort of the same thing. Like you have this syllable stretched over like an entire musical phrase. These lyrics are referring to the military. Remember, it was supposed to be like a sort of a sad. So when we study this is from the CD "The Music Burst Out." It's Protashnia. It's from the Smolensk region of Russia. Professional vocal ensembles, so some of you may be hearing about this, but most of these folk songs were sung by professionals who have a training in singing transcribed songs. The Zapevs begin each verse. Remember, these Zapevs are a solo introduction, and then all of a sudden I have the Podgoloski, which are these under voices, like they're joining, and then at the end of the verse they all sort of join together. And they also have wide intervals. They're sort of like, I don't know, they're longer. The genres of folk songs, there's protashnia, which we talked about being prolonged, or a lyrical song. It's typically melismatic, so again, the symbols stretched across a musical phrase. This is most known to city dwellers, and it's symbolically linked to Russia. This one is from a novel, the Nikolai Gogol, in this novel called Dead Souls, and in this novel he sings protashnia as well, so that's sort of like this link to Russia, this protashnia. Calendar songs we talked about, they're only performed certain times. They're older than lyrical songs. They have like pagan and Christian symbols. They're sort of like religious, and the more syllabic, shorter phrase, not stretched out like melismatic. The second song that we listen to is Octastep. Octastep is a protashnia song, but it's urban, so it's less melismatic. The urban style is more pronounced. We have wide intervals, not short ones, and this is like a lyrical, sorrowful type song. So this one was actually created in the city. That's why they call it the urban protashnia. Folk song collections, you should know some of these guys. I know in class they talk about how, I don't know how you can remember these, but maybe if we talk about it a little bit slower, maybe you'll remember. Lvov Prash is the most influential early collection with text and music. They took most of the folk songs, however, later on they were sort of accused, and they said that maybe these aren't original songs, and they tried to make it more westernized. And all of a sudden, they sort of fell from favor, and it's not like, they think that it's not very accurate or authentic. Like they sort of, it's not real, essentially. It's not legit. Okay? Balakirev collection was more stressed the distinctive sound of folk music. So it's not like this one, which was westernized. This one's like, hey, this is more authentic. They did it, or the reason why it's more authentic, they use diatonic harmonies, simple triads. They flatten the seventh degrees, so the sound's a little bit more ancient. That's why they say it's a little bit more authentic. So Lvov Prash, Balakirev. So two different folk song collections. Not to be confused, three more folk song collections. Melgunov. They sort of tried to notate their own. All these are collections that before they had audio recording. So he notated sort of heterophonic songs. He listened to several singers at a time, and then combined the score. Rimsky-Korsakov, remember we studied this before, I remember his name. He said that Melgunov's collection was barbaric because this heterophonic texture was like not like his own. So Rimsky-Korsakov, one of these famous like musicians, remember, he said like, oh, it's barbaric and not real because of this heterophonic thing that he was doing. And he introduced the folk texture to the world. Palchikov, he probably produced the best for polyphony. He notated each singer's part individually and in multiple performances. So by doing like just one singer as opposed to several singers, this polyphony from Palchikov was a better result. The problem is that it was sort of obscure, like nobody could actually access it or see these ones. So Palchikov's was not very accessible to everybody else. So Melgunov, quote unquote, won, or theirs was better. And the last one, oops, sorry. Let me get back to that. Last one, Linyova. Linyova introduced her first folk collection in 1904, and she was the first one that used audio recording technology and transcription. So composers can no longer deny sort of like heterophony or polyphony. It's like, hey, I got this audio recording. You can't say it's not real anymore because I recorded it. Okay. So what are the themes in classical music? We have different folk themes. We've got distinguished lower class characters. We have compositions linked to nationalism. We have sympathy and acclaim from audiences and sort of like inspiring new techniques. So composers in classical music, they like to use these folk themes for a lot of reasons. We characterize the lower class. Makes it sound more national. So if it's folk, how about this? This is why they use folk themes in classical music. First of all, it distinguished lower class. So those that were in the lower class or had a heart for the lower class were like, oh, okay, I like this classical music. It's got a folk theme. Same thing with nationalistic. So hey, if I make my classical music nationalistic, everybody wants to listen to it. Audiences gave it sympathy and acclaim. And also the folk themes also inspired new techniques for harmony, for rhythm, stuff like that. So that's why they use a lot of folk themes in classical music. And the last side in this one, myths and exaggerations. So many national composers sort of exaggerated their knowledge of folk traditions. Most of the composers actually came from, like, how about this? The folk songs were from like the peasants and stuff like that, but they're saying that the people that composed it and did all this stuff, they're actually rich people. So like, how could rich people, quote unquote, talk about the plight or say that they know what the poor are? So they didn't grow up to folk music. They didn't, they studied folk music, but it's like if rich people like said they were gonna recreate the hip hop music scene, like they don't know, or gangster rap, they don't know what it's like. They're just copying how it used to be. Okay. So they exaggerated the authenticity of quoted folk songs, and they also said that scholars said like, oh, this nationalism folk songs, like it was overplayed, like it's not really that nationalistic, but they just said so. So that's the part one for music. I know we've gone over a lot. Hopefully you can retain those people, those names I've been talking about, or at least a different type of folk song collections. And yeah, hope you enjoyed.